Hey everybody, welcome into my channel, Beyond the Briefing. I'm JP Dice. Hope you're having a great week. And the last time we talked, I was talking about a big trip that we were going to be taking, and we were going to be really doing this massive cross-country, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and we did it. Went up to Cooperstown, North Dakota, Custer, South Dakota, and Omaha, Nebraska, via several different waypoints. I'll show you the plot here. Big trip, and this was over 2,300 nautical miles. So there you have Birmingham, fuel stop in Quincy, Illinois, up to Fargo. Spent the night in Fargo, then went to an airport, S-32, which is in Cooperstown, North Dakota, visited the Ronald Reagan Minuteman Missile Museum. You go into the command center there, and then you can look at the capsule where the launch control center was. And then we drove over to the actual missile silo. Each control center would control 10 different missiles. This was a decommissioned one. There's still many in operation in North Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana. After the visit to Cooperstown, flew across North Dakota down to Custer, South Dakota, and went across the Black Hills there, and actually did a little flyby, and you'll see that here in a moment, Mount Rushmore. Landed at Custer and spent the night there, then to Valentine, Nebraska, fuel stop there. Then Millard, just outside of Omaha, visited the Strategic Air Command Museum and stopped in the Lake of the Ozarks for fuel, then back on into Birmingham. Yeah, long trip, and we did it in my, there you go, my Mooney M20J. And can you believe we did this entire trip? I know, hard to believe, VFR. We stayed out of the clouds. We managed to plan this, and really it was fantastic. Did a bit of a kind of a loose formation along the way. Every now and then we would get a little closer for some picture taking, but some buddies of mine who have an RV6 flew alongside of us and visited all these places. If you ever have the opportunity to do a cross country with somebody else in another airplane, really neat thing to do. Makes the time pass very quickly. So I was in the M20J, and I'll go ahead and show you some other pictures here because you guys had wanted to learn more about this massive cross country. That's their airplane. That's the RV6 that they were in. A little tighter than the Mooney. They complained a little bit more about needing to stretch for obvious reasons. This is the panel inside my Mooney. I have a 1978 Mooney M20J, J model 201. Obviously not the 1978 panel, 3-screen Aspen, 696 in the panel as well for XM weather and music, a little entertainment there. And with this setup, I can get ADS-B weather on the Aspens. I can get traffic there. Really great for situational awareness. My ADS-B solution is the Garmin GTX 345. So as far as speeds, I managed to stay at about 155, 160 true the entire trip. And I mentioned that we were VFR. So we had the radar weather in the airplane. Obviously, this is XM that you're looking at here, which does have some resolution issues because of bandwidth. You're looking at composite data. It doesn't really give you that fine resolution that you're used to looking at perhaps on some of your weather apps on the phone or even on television. At the TV station where I work, we have very high resolution data that's coming off the NEXRAD radars, but still, nonetheless, this really helps you out in your planning. And you can see what we were seeing out the right side of the airplane here as we kind of skirted around some of that rain. This was, I believe, in Minnesota. So most of the trip, not an issue. At one point, had to climb up to 11,500 to stay out of the clouds there for at least a little bit. And this is what it looks like when you're flying across North Dakota. Much of the trip was CAVU, clear and visibility unlimited. This is what it looked like across North Dakota. And if you're thinking about emergency landings and so forth, one thing, it's flat in North Dakota and all of the roads are straight lines. Very little traffic out there, so if you did have an engine out emergency or something, it would not be very difficult to get on the ground safely in that kind of environment. On down, one thing you do notice flying across Iowa and also North Dakota, Parts of Nebraska, lots of wind farms. These are those big wind turbines. And I don't know if you've ever caught the YouTube videos of those. If they have basically a prop governor failure, you'll see those things kind of spin out of control. And they've been known to come apart on rare occasions. You can find some YouTube videos of that. But these things are pretty neat. And this is the video of the Mooney with Mount Rushmore in the background. So you can see there's Rushmore and there's the Mooney, and this is our friends in the RV6 taking that picture. If you ever go up there and you want to do kind of a flyby and some sightseeing on Rushmore, coordinate with Ellsworth Air Force Base. The folks there are very familiar with people doing that. We flew right over Ellsworth, which is a B-1 bomber base, which is really neat to see all those aircraft down there. Really cool airplane. So we flew on really a Unicom frequency that is set up for Rushmore. It's called Rushmore Unicom. Ellsworth takes care of you for a little while, then you get on Rushmore Unicom, and I think it's 123.0. And you guys just coordinate with other aircraft. There's some helicopter tours going on out there too. So you really need to be on your game. Obviously, you need to have decent weather to do this, but you need to be on your game, head on a swivel. I had my buddy in the plane. He's looking out, making sure that we're not hitting anything. I'm making sure we're not hitting anything. You need to have a lot of focus in the cockpit, a lot of situational awareness, and it's also very bumpy. From a weather perspective, what you have, obviously you have wind that's coming in over the hills, over the terrain, and it kind of just kicks up these little rotors and so forth, and you get a lot of turbulence there. Then we landed at Custer. Caution, density altitude, check your aircraft performance. And this was a little bit of a concern, obviously. The Mooney in a high density altitude, at least my model of Mooney, can have a tendency to struggle just a little bit. So when we left out of there, the elevation 5,600 feet, I ran the performance calculations over and over and over again to the point of being OCD, because the last thing you want to do is be out of runway and have no climb performance in mountainous terrain. And as we've talked before, and as you learned when you were even getting your private pilot certificate, what happens, higher density altitude, at these higher elevations, your engine is not producing 100% power. You're probably at around 70-75% power at full throttle unless your aircraft is turbocharged, okay? So you're not producing full power. Your prop's not biting that air like it would at sea level or a lower elevation, and your wings are not getting as much lift. So this is very critical. This has bitten a lot of people before because they will take off at one place. Hey, I'm doing fine. They'll get to a higher elevation, and then they will find themselves backed in a corner. They can't climb, and they're out of runway. So run those calculations. I was a little bit of a chicken at first. I'll let my buddies who are both Air Force pilots take off of the RV6 first and see how their performance was. And then I did it. I figured, okay, these guys, you know, they're going to be able to pull this off. And what we did, both of us, we looked at our fuel load. I went out of there with what I consider minimum fuel, 22 gallons of gas. That got me about an hour and 45 minutes of fuel to get to Valentine, Nebraska. That would enable me to safely get there with my reserves. You don't want to top off if you're in Custer, South Dakota, unless you are by yourself. So just keep that in mind. Density altitude is a big deal. There is a video. I absolutely love this video. In fact, my wife likes this video, and she does not even fly airplanes. Have you ever seen the FAA video? Back in the 1960s, the FAA produced videos that were quite entertaining. They had little storylines and everything. This is called Density Altitude, and it's with Harry Bliss. I'll go to the next graphic here, and I think I can actually play a little bit of this.
In the next few minutes, Harry will regret he didn't. For once again, he has come face to face with the adverse effects of density altitude.
That's Harry and his wife, and what you're seeing is Harry and his wife leave, I think, Lakefront Airport in New Orleans, and they're going out west. He's a photographer, and he's in his VTEL Bonanza, and they're taking all sorts of pictures and everything. Well, what happens is he's going to these higher elevation airports. He's not paying attention to density, altitude, or the aircraft performance, and he really gets himself almost about this far from a crash several times. Harry is kind of one of these know-it-all pilots. He's got it all figured out, even an airline pilot, and you'll see this in the story. Go to YouTube, you can find this. It is cool as can be. Airline pilot says, hey, you need to watch your density, altitude. You know, these airplanes perform differently at different elevations. And Harry, who's a private pilot here, just kind of blows off the airline pilot who had, thousands of hours of experience. So density, altitude is a big deal, and we came face to face with it on our trip. Performance was fine. We were in the air about halfway down the runway. But again, looking back, we took off in the morning when the temperatures were cooler, and we also made sure that we did not have a whole lot of weight on board the airplane. So coming on back, we'll go to the next graphic here, and let's see what I've got. And I said we maintained VFR the entire trip, and we did. The worst of the weather actually happened when we got back closer to Alabama. We started seeing thunderstorms on the return trip, and they were just covering the NEXRAD radar. Remember, there's that time latency, that time lag with NEXRAD, and also the resolution is not as good as what you would have with maybe looking at RadarScope or one of those apps like that. So this is I call it the DICE plan. Many of you guys probably share the same thoughts on this. Even as an instrument pilot, I do this sometimes. Visualize the storms. So what's the best way to visualize it? If your ceilings are high enough, and these ceilings were about 4,000 feet, I got down low. I got underneath these, and I could pinpoint, I could see the rain shafts, and that allowed me to successfully pick my way around these thunderstorms. The scariest thing to me is being IMC. You can't see anything, and you've got something lurking on the back side there, and it's not really being picked up by radar very well, or the radar data is not that good. I like to see this stuff. So this is what it looked like out the window, and I think I have a picture here of, maybe not, of what it looked like on the radar. Well, the radar was pretty covered up. It was a good chance of rain that particular day. So keep that in mind. Even if you are an instrument pilot, visualize these storms so you can easily navigate around them. Plus, air traffic control is a great resource. Now remember, air traffic controllers are looking at real-time radar. Those ASR radars, those Raytheon ASR9 radars, actually depict several levels of intensity of weather. I believe 6 levels of intensity. That's an S-band radar. It doesn't suffer the attenuation that even an airplane radar is going to suffer. So listen to the air traffic controllers as well, because they are getting that real-time information that can really help you out. But again, 2,300 and some odd nautical miles. Average true airspeed was about 155 knots for most of this, and the altitude that we flew most often was around 8,500 feet. We came back at 7,500. We had a few situations where we climbed up to 11,005 and a few where we got down lower, down beneath the clouds and the rain. But overall, a fantastic trip. Some folks have even asked, hey, how did you manage to take a trip like this with the COVID situation going on and all of that? Well, keep in mind, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska are not really hotbed states, and some of these were kind of remote areas. In Cooperstown, South Dakota, it was almost an unheard of thing. I think they were more worried about us than we were them. So, plus flying in your own personal airplane too, you know who you're sitting next to. So that does help out. And many of the areas did require masks and everything else. So a lot of precautions there, but again, not really hotbed areas. As I like to say, some of the stuff that I'm into is so nerdy that the rest of the world doesn't even go. But the SAC Museum, I think, had 3 or 4 people in there, and that was us. Not many people there. That is a fantastic museum, by the way. If you can ever get out to just outside of Omaha, the Strategic Air Command Museum, the size of the B-36, an incredible airplane, and that served 1948, I believe, until 1959. If you ever get to see the old Jimmy Stewart movie, Strategic Air Command, that airplane's in there. They had a B-52, B-47, B-58. It was really, really a neat facility there. But big cross country, you know, it comes down to it. Some of my bigger cross countries have actually been done VFR. So if you are a VFR only pilot and you plan things out right, you can stay out of the clouds and actually have a pretty good trip. You just got to have some planning, some resources, and always have yourself a backup plan. We were constantly in the air looking at weather information. We were talking back and forth, airplane to airplane. In fact, on one of those legs, we were going to stop somewhere in Missouri, I think Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and the weather was not so great there, so we ended up at the Lake of the Ozarks where the weather was much better. So you're constantly looking at that information. Weather's not static. Weather's always changing, and you can never be basing decisions off old data and old information. So that's why it's very fluid. You need to make sure you look at things on the ground, look at the best radar information on the ground. Radar Scope is an app I really recommend for that kind of thing. And in the later edition here, episode, we'll go over some of those radar apps and how to use those. We had ForeFlight in the air. We had our cockpit weather displays. Plus, we were utilizing the resources of air traffic control as well. They were very helpful with the flight following and just letting us know where they were also seeing some precipitation. Enjoyed the trip, and I hope you get to make some cool trips too. As always, be safe out there. The weather is not always your friend, and our mission here with Beyond the Briefing is to actually help people stay safe and make those critical weather decisions, those no, go, and go decisions, and really mitigate those risks when it comes to what Mother Nature can do to you. If you like this episode, of course, I'd love for you to subscribe. We're going to be churning these things out every week. I have a huge passion in aviation and spend a lot of time instructing folks, and obviously, a lot of time as a TV meteorologist. Been doing that for 25 years now. I'll see you next time. Fly safe.